Well, friends, I'm still in this wild place. I remember it wasn't too long ago where my wife and I, we just had our first child, where Mason was just born. And, we'd be inviting people not to a service at the school, definitely not to a service in a building, but we'd be inviting people to a Bible study in our living room and just saying, hey, listen, we're starting this church. We'd love for you to come be a part of it and what God is doing. We believe God has more for you than he wants from you. And we'd share these things, and I just remember all those years ago, we'd throw our little boy in a stroller. Now he's walking around and he's invite people himself. We'd throw our little boy in a stroller. We'd walk around neighborhoods and just knock on doors and invite people and hang up invites. And I just always remember we'd walk up to houses and people would come peek through the blinds, right? Again, who are these people, right? They see, I can just imagine, honey, there's a guy with a baby at our front door. Like, what is happening right now? And I just walked around inviting people. I remember there was this one lady. Some of you may remember her. There was one lady we got to meet with, and her name was Cindy. She lived in an apartment complex here in town. And I remember getting to talk with her. One of the first things that she shared with us is we were sitting there talking and just kind of sharing about what God is doing. She was an older woman with a kind of a cognitive impairment, so she had a very much of a childlike personality. And you see, I remember talking with her, she would go on to express how she's never been welcomed in the church. Like she would come in, and it was clear to everyone that she'd be different, and she would never be welcomed. And we assured her over and over again that you'd feel like family in our church. And some of you remember Cindy, she'd come into our services, she'd walk to church, and on hot days we'd go pick her up. On rainy days we'd go pick her up. Some days she's like, no, I'm walking anyway. I need the exercise. And she'd walk over to church, and she'd be in this school, and I remember just the joy she found in hearing the sermon, and joy she found in worshiping, getting to be with people. And it was exciting always. I remember the one time we had a baptism Sunday, and we were baptizing these people, and then all of a sudden, she didn't come with clothes to be, baptized, but she said, no, I want to be baptized. And so sure enough, fully dressed, she jumps in the baptism tank, and it's so exciting to see. And she's such a great joy of what God was doing in her heart. A few years ago, if you know her, she passed away. I remember when I was meeting her family, I remember being in their living room. They would go on to really express how she always talked about her church. She talked about the love that she was given there that she had never known. A love for people that she had never known. Yeah, see, I learned a long time ago that most people are hurting. Maybe it's something they're going through at that moment in time in their life, or maybe it's something they're still recovering from that was recent. But most people are hurting. We do a really great job at trying to bury it behind us and try to ignore it and try to keep the good face, don't we? We're good at trying to make sure that people don't see the holes in our armor, that people see the smile, that people still see that we're doing okay, that we're moving along, that those who can depend on us can still depend on us, and those who need things from us can still ask. And we just try to be ourselves. We just try to put up this front, and we try to show that we're still strong. But at times in life, we go through seasons where we're struggling. We go through seasons of life where, frankly, it's really hard to be optimistic and even hopeful. And if you know me, you know that I'm a fairly optimistic, very optimistic person. And so even for me, seasons where I find it hard to put on that smile. Days where it's hard to get out of bed. And friends, I want us to lean into this question together of where is your hope? Of where is your hope? This question matters. You see, there's this book in the New Testament called Colossians. If you're not familiar with the Bible, then you're in the right place. You belong right here. We love to learn, we love to grow, don't we, church? Amen. Amen. And so no need to feel like you need to know everything. This is a great place to belong and begin to grow. And you see in the Bible, there's all these different books written by different people over time. And you see in the New Testament portion, that's where we read about Jesus. And you see in the New Testament, there's 4 books known as the Gospels, which tell us about the life of Jesus. And they're amazing. Actually, in a few months, we're going to be going through a small group, kind of all together for about 7-8 weeks. And we're going to just spend the entire time in the Gospel of John just reading about Jesus. Just say, Lord, give me everything of who Jesus is. And I can't wait for that. We'll have sign-ups and all that stuff in the weeks to come. But you see, after the Gospels, after particularly the Gospel of John, we find the book of Acts, which tells us about the start of the church. And it's so exciting to see how the church is born and comes together. And then after the book of Acts, from Romans to Revelation, we see all these different letters written by church leaders to encourage the church in all different cities and all different locations around the known world at that time. You see, the book of Colossians comes about, and it's written to this kind of city that's really far out into the middle of nowhere. A lot of the civilization at the time of the world was built near the ocean. The city of Colossae was far inland. It was up in the mountains. It would be up in the upstate, up in the mountains if it were here in South Carolina, far away from the coast. And some of us are like, that sounds great, right, to be up in the mountains. But these people were far away from everyone, isolated, and no one was around them. And the believers that lived there were very alone. They were very alone. They weren't anywhere near any of the other churches. They weren't anywhere near any of the other groups or pockets of Christians in the world. They were very much alone. And they were very much even in a culture where everything was mixed with a lot of different stuff and different philosophies and ideas and beliefs and religions and all this stuff. And they felt so alone. And you see, one of the church leaders named Paul, even while Paul himself is in jail for sharing about Jesus, he finds time to write this letter of encouragement to these people that to us is known as Colossians. Colossians chapter 1, verse 2 says this. It says, we. This is Paul and even a few of his other assistants, his other team members who are with him. He says, we are writing to God's holy people in the city of Colossae who are faithful brothers and sisters in Christ. May God our Father give you grace and peace. We always pray for you, and we give thanks to God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. For we have heard of your faith in Christ Jesus and your love for all God's people. And listen to what it says next. It says, which come from your confident hope. Let me read that again. Which come from your confident hope of what God has reserved for you in heaven. I love this moment because he goes on to explain about how he is appreciating how they in their way of life and in their culture, they have found themselves with targets on their back, but yet still they have been people who have had this rootedness, this ground, this anchoredness, that they had this confident hope of God in their life. Paul says it in such a kind of a beautiful way, this confident hope of what God has reserved for them in heaven, but what he's speaking to is simply their belonging to Jesus. He's speaking of their faith in the Lord. He's speaking of how they love God and how they are God's people, and he says this confident hope that they belong to God. And I remember when I read this for the first time, I was even had this question put against me where I said, I wonder if that would even be said about me. My confident hope in God. Because friends, this reality is that faith is something we're familiar with. Faith is believing that nothing is impossible for God. We know this. We read scriptures about it. There's all sorts of Bible verses about it. We know this. This is something we share often, what we encourage each other with, that faith is believing that nothing is impossible for God. But understand is that hope is different. Hope is knowing that something is possible for God.
Amen.
And we can be in moments, people who have this belief that God is real. Hope is long out the door. You know, my wife and I in 2019, we had probably the most terrifying year of our life through a freak accident from a simple medical procedure that was nobody's fault, but my wife was moments from dying. Aaron was close. And many of you were even in our life and encouraging us in that time. And I remember being in the ER downtown at MUSC, and not in like the ER part where a lot of people see, but the large, serious, intense part of the ER with all the machines and all the doctors and staff. And Aaron would be in this bed in this whole huge room that was probably half the size of this with all this equipment. And I just remember being in that moment and being terrified. I mean, have you ever had a moment where fear paralyzes you? Where you are afraid and you can't speak, you can barely listen, you can't even move. I remember being there in the room with Aaron laying down and doctors and staff talking and moving all around and machines beeping, and my mother-in-law too was there with me next to me. And I remember this moment of the doctor explaining what's happening and what they're trying to do, and they still don't even have answers of what they're trying to fix. And I remember this moment of everything is just quiet. And all I can hear is my mother-in-law next to me praying for my wife. All I can hear is her voice, even though doctors are speaking and things are going off and alarms and all this other stuff. All I can hear is her voice in this moment of where I am speechless and I'm afraid. I'm afraid for my wife. I'm afraid for my son who may now lose his mom. I'm afraid for us, and I am terrified. In this moment of where I had faith. I knew the dozens of scripture verses that speak of how God can do anything. But that hope that this moment is something where the Lord can and will resolve. That moment I was hopeless. Understand, friends, that faith and hope are not the same thing. Understand that we can grow up in church our entire life. We can believe that God is real. We can have some of these things about us, but understand that doesn't mean that hope is there, this confident hope of what Paul is talking about. It doesn't mean that it is there inside of our soul in moments like those. Moments where everything is out of control, when things with our marriage are going sideways, where things with our kids are we don't even know where to begin what happened with that, things with our own health, things with our neighbors, things in our life, things with our job. When chaos comes up, when even in our own mind, our own heart, when depression and anxiety and loneliness, all those things really begin to stir around, we find it so easy to say, yeah, I believe, but man, right now in this moment, I don't know if God could really fix it. I don't really know that in this moment I could say that I have hope, that this moment is something that the Lord can help with. And friends, I encourage us more than anything in the world this morning. I don't know where you are with God. I don't know what your story is. I don't know what is behind you and what is in front of you right now, but I hope more than anything in the world this morning is we get to lean into this, that we get to see for ourselves what it's like to be people who are filled with the hope of Jesus. Because he is the hope of the world and he is the hope of our life, friends. You see what Paul begins to go on and say next in verse 6, he says this, he says, this same good news that came to you is going out over all the world. It is bearing fruit everywhere by changing lives, just as it changed your lives from the day you first heard and understood the truth about God's wonderful grace. See, friends, what I've noticed for a lot of people is we've lived this life, and sometimes we grew up in church, and we can even quote the Veggie Tales kind of kids lessons that we grew up with, right? And even sometimes as parents, we watch our kids watch those shows, and we're like, man, I remember that when I was their age. Remember, watching it for the first time. But sometimes as kids, as people, back in those childhood years, we kind of learn and are exposed to, and we understand, we get this bit of faith deposit into our life from our parents or grandparents or people around us. But you see, what happens is so easily, friends, so easily, is at the core of what this whole journey is about, fades so quickly into the background. And you see, what happens is that we become people. I mean, I love this moment where he says, you know, the gospel that's been given to you, as he's speaking to the people of Colossae, he said, the gospel of Jesus that's been given to you. This amazing news about how the world is messed up and broken. Now there's pain and chaos, and humanity caused it, not God. Humanity caused it. We turned our backs on God, but what's amazing is that he did not turn his back on us. Amen, friends? And the reality is I love how he is sharing this to the gospel that you know, how God has stepped into the world and how he healed people. I mean, you read the gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You read about Jesus and how he would heal people. I mean, it is amazing to read these stories of people who are forgotten and on the edge of society, how he would love them and heal them. And he made it clear that he was up to something bigger, that he would heal the body, but what is even more important is healing the soul. And the soul of humanity is so shattered, and I right now am set on a mission to redeem and reclaim the soul of the world. And you see what he says and what he's explaining, what he does, is as he's healing people, people get angry at Jesus. And what happens is he gets falsely accused. He gets thrown on a cross, much like what we sang earlier. And you see, while they all thinking they've won, he said, this has been my plan the entire time. And what's amazing is that in this time, as he dies, Christ, this man who is God, God in the flesh, has now become the one who's been able to pay the fine against all of humanity's selfishness. Just as if we speed around town and Berkeley County gives us a speeding ticket, and that fine is due. In this moment, Jesus said, I finally have paid the bill for those who want me to. And then he rises from the dead, proving that he is God. He rises from the grave, showing that not only as he set out to pay the bill that's due, to provide forgiveness for people, but I have set out to reclaim their soul, to give them new life, and that they would know me, and that not only would they have the gift of heaven when they leave this earth, but they would have the gift of God in their life as they live throughout their life. And that their soul, what makes them who they are, understand your soul is who you are underneath all of you. And he says, if I can fix that in a person, which is what happens when we follow Jesus, if I can fix it, they would know why they are alive. They would know who they are. They would know their purpose. They would know their meaning. And if they were just to follow me, they would have a fulfilling life. See, that is the gospel. And Jesus shared, and Paul shares, you've seen the gospel change all these other people's lives. And he says, and just as you've seen it change your life, he says, don't you dare twist it. We're going to find out, we're going to read the entire book of Colossians over the next couple of weeks, and they began to twist some of the gospel. He says, don't you twist it, because it is what has changed your life. And you see, what happens is we so easily, friends, we so easily welcome in these ideas. We welcome in these ideas and these belief systems that are way outside of the Bible, way outside of what Jesus teaches about what it looks like to follow him. And we wonder why we are feeling washed up in our faith. We believe that God is real and we try to be a good person. But it's not about trying to be a good person. But we've somehow have gotten this sense of identity that, man, if I'm going to be a Christian, I've got to be a really good person. I've got to be nice and I've got to be cheerful and I've got to go to church, right? And I've got to give and I've got to serve. And I've got to earn my way to please God. And that's not what meetings is about. None of it. But we drift that way because it gives us a sense of dignity. When the Lord says, allow me to be your dignity. Let me make you who you're supposed to be. And you see, he is urging them to lean into the gospel because that is the source of the hope that they have come to know. And friends, I urge you in your life, lean back into what the gospel really is. And maybe as I say that word, it feels like you just went back in time 30 years. But understand this great news of what God is up to in the world, he wants to do in your life. The sense of knowing why you're here and who you are in the world. Lean in. What I love next is as Paul is writing, he goes on to verse 9 and he says this, he says, so we, again, himself and his others who are working with him. He says, "So we have not stopped praying for you since we have first heard about you. We ask God to give you complete knowledge of his will and to give you spiritual wisdom and understanding. Then the way you live will always honor and please the Lord, and your lives will produce every kind of good fruit. All the while, you will grow as you learn to know God better and better." Friends, we oftentimes find ourselves in these seasons, these patterns where we feel washed up, like our faith checking account is empty. Because frankly, we become stagnant in our pursuit of Christ. You see, I love this imagery. I heard it a long time ago from another pastor, that it's much like being abandoned at sea. Being abandoned at sea, having shipwrecked out into the ocean, and being there and alone, and we're bobbing up and down with the waves, and there's moments where we can get our head above water, and there's moments when we're drowning. And you see, what happens is this boat comes along to offer us help. The message of Jesus comes along in our life to help us, to rescue us. But we say, no, just give me a little child floaty and I'll be fine. And you know, we've got 3 small kids. Those little rubber things, I couldn't even fit them on. I could barely fit my finger right now. But he says, just give me one of those little child floaties and I'll be fine. And so we become people who say, yeah, I believe in God. I've accepted his offer to help me. But we've not really taken him up on his invitation. We've not really gone deeper in growing and understanding, for one, the condition of our soul, but especially the love that he has for us, for you. And we settle for this little child floating with the little duck on it, right? And the little turtle, right? Or whatever else pictures are on it. And we wonder why. We think we're clinging to God, but we still feel like we're drowning in this world. We wonder why. And we're still alone. We've tried our best. It doesn't seem like it's working. Maybe we've made a good life for ourselves. It's not really satisfying us. Man, I've tried my best to live things right and do things well. But I wonder why. It feels like I'm always falling short. Why is it that I go to pray sometimes and I feel like God's not looking? Why does it feel sometimes that I'm so far away from him? I have this faith, but yet I still feel like I'm drowning in this life. And friends, I urge us not only do we need to grab a hold of the gospel again in our life, but we need to grow in our pursuit of knowing Jesus. Maybe for too long we've been living off of the crumbs that's around us. We go to church once a year. We have this childhood of VeggieTales and learning about Jesus. And so we try to live off these crumbs. We don't ever find growth in Christian community. We don't find belonging in a church family. None of that stuff. And we try to live off the crumbs. And we wonder why we are so easily sucked down in this world. Because, friends, we're not biting our teeth into the meat and potatoes, and we're not going deeper into our walk with God. And I urge you. I urge you. Listen, if you are in this season where you feel like you're bobbing up and down, and this faith has always been there, but where is the hope? I urge you to go deeper in your pursuit of wanting Jesus, wanting him in your life. I remember meeting with a young adult who was about to head off to college, and he was sharing all these things about how he was struggling with anxiety and depression, and he felt so alone in the world. He's going to college, and he was afraid and all this stuff, and he'd even been going to our church for some time, and I just remember getting to share with him, understand this is not just about this information that fills your skull. It doesn't just fill this little thing on top of your body. Understand that it has to drift down into your heart. And you have to once again love God. And you have to want him. And you have to grow in that love. And sometimes, for those of you who are married, you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes you don't feel like loving your spouse, but you know that you need to, right? Maybe it's just me. Maybe y'all are a whole lot holier than I am, all right? And so, but you know the right thing to do to be selfless and to love well, but sometimes the desire to do so is not there. And in those moments, we have to choose love. And we say, Holy Spirit, help me to want to do the dishes for my lovely spouse. Help me to want to serve, right? Help me to want to do this stuff. Sometimes we have to choose, but understand. Sometimes just tell our heart and say, no, I'm the boss. I'm the boss, and I want to love God. I don't want to love all this other stuff in my life. I want to love Him. And we have these moments of really coming back to the beginning and saying, Lord, I want to put you first. As Paul in this moment, he's urging them on, listen, to grow in their sense of understanding who God is more and more. They become people who fall in love, and that we would toss out this little baby floaty that we've been holding on to. And saying, God, I really want to build my life on you. I'm really tired of trying to do it my own self. I want you to do it. We get to climb into the boat. I love what Paul goes on to say in verse 11. He says, we also pray that you will be strengthened with all His glorious power, so you will have all the endurance and patience you need. May you be filled with joy, always thanking the Father. Could you imagine always filled with joy, thanking the Father? He has enabled you to share in the inheritance that belongs to His people who live in the light. For He has rescued us from the kingdom of darkness and transferred us into the kingdom of His dear Son, who purchased our freedom and forgave our sins. I learned some time ago that it's often not what people don't know about following Jesus that keeps them at bay. It's often what they think they do know. I remember years ago when I was in high school, it was a little while ago. I remember when I was in high school, I spent one summer out in Montana, and which was very different than South Carolina, very different than when I grew up. And I spent a summer out in Montana in this tiny town as a camp counselor at a Christian Bible camp, and for kind of elementary age kids. And I was very different than all of the kids who were there, but I was eager for this experience. We were out in the middle of nowhere, and I've never been so far removed from civilization in my entire life. We were 2 hours from Walmart. I couldn't even imagine, right? 2 hours from Walmart. No Dollar General, right? No Circle K, nothing. No Parkers. I mean, we were 2 hours from civilization, and it was just insane. Like I mean, we live right here in town. We can just zoom up and we forget something, right? Or go to the dollar store. 2 hours from Walmart. I mean, we're out in the middle of nowhere, and just beautiful country, love the vacation. Probably couldn't live there. And I remember being there, and with all these kids, 10, 11 years old. And I'll tell you right now, these group of kids, they're manlier than me. Right? I was about 16 at the time, and these kids, I mean, they are drinking black coffee in the morning. They're waking up early, right, before the sun goes. I mean, these kids are working the farm, the cattle, the ranch all day long, and here I come in, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to wake up in the morning. It's 5 a.m. They're climbing out of bed because that's just what they're used to in their routine, drinking their black coffee with their wheat, you know, the little straw, wheat straw that kind of hang out of their mouth, right, that sort of thing. Not the other thing that maybe you thought I said for a second there, and these kids are just, they're manly kids. Like, I mean, they would just, I mean, I'm sure they would eat like snakes for breakfast. Like, they were just like tough kids. And I remember one day as we were there with this group of kids, and I remember one of them asked, he said this question, I'll never forget it. Maybe you've heard me tell the story before. He asked this question: why do I need to stop having fun right now in my life? And why can't I just wait to get serious about God and all this Jesus stuff? That was a great question. I have no idea what I gave him as a response way back then. But it's a question that I found has really been in the mind part of even many adults, but we don't have the courage to say it out loud. You see, what I would begin to say to someone today, and I think what Paul is encouraging in this moment, is to recognize that Jesus aims to rescue us from darkness. If you spend time talking to someone who's lived a pretty long life, maybe you feel that's like you won't use the O word, but sometimes we come to a point in our life where we have a lot of regrets. I don't know what your story is, but for a long part of my life, I didn't follow Jesus. And even today, I still have regrets of my youth, regrets of my teen years. And you see, we can live this life being steered by what we want. The things sometimes our heart wants what it wants, and we can live by that sort of compass. But you'll find when you spend time with people who've lived quite a long life, is that they have these regrets, they have these things in their heart that they really wish they would have done differently. How wonderful would it be if we did not come to that day and feeling that? And you see, the reality is that there are some things that we really want in life that are not good for us. There's some desires in our life that we want that are not good for us. And if we welcome Jesus in and walked in his light, we would know what it looks like to live a fulfilling life. So this idea of putting off what is fun and getting serious later, understand that what is fun is walking with God and understand what it likes to be whole and have a life that is found and full and filled. Whether we be later in life and man, we have years of regret and the Lord can wipe all that off of our soul. How amazing it is that he wants to do that for you. Or we are in our early years and we're getting onto our own 2 feet and we're creating this life for ourselves, and how God so badly wants to be a part of holding the compass of what direction we go in. The relationships that we dive into, the people we trust, the advice that we take, and the circles that we surround ourselves with. How great it would be for him to be at the core of our life and help us live in such a way where we have embraced and have experienced for ourselves this true sense of no longer living in the darkness. Those moments of waking up in the middle of the night and feeling overwhelmed with anxiousness have now been surrendered to Jesus. They're no longer holding on to me, but they've been handed over to him. Jesus invites us into that sort of way of life, these moments where we're afraid to do something, we're afraid of what's next, we're afraid of making the wrong decision, how the Lord wants to come in. He says, please let me walk through this with you. You see, we all the time, I find people who believe this idea that they're so far away from God, there's no way the Lord would ever want to help them. And what I love to say is that you can feel like you make a million wrong turns away from God, but you are always, always just one right turn away from walking with him again. So it's not about being perfect. It's not about being good enough. It's not about earning or creating this own sense of dignity and proudness of look what I have done. It's a sense of saying, Lord, have your way in my life. And do with me whatever you aim to do. God, have your way. And I don't know your story. I don't know where you are with God. I don't know where you're where you've been or what you've been a part of. I don't know what resides in your soul. But I urge you, lean into God. Lean into him. And say, Lord, I want you so bad in my life right here and now. I remember years ago when we were first getting started over at the middle school, we were doing a bunch of these direct mailers. And if you've lived in the area for a while, then you've probably gotten some of our direct mailers over the years. And I remember there was this one time that we had 25,000 direct mailers printed up online and mailed to our house to then send out from the post office box. I remember they were being shipped to our home, and we got the notification from FedEx that they'd been delivered, but they were not on our front door. And come to find out, they'd been delivered to a house down the street. And we were terrified, and thankfully we got connected, and there's a dozen boxes. They're huge, right? And I remember talking with the young man who lived in the house. He was probably in his 20s or 30s. He was on his own. lived by himself, working hard in the area. And where he talks through some things, and he shared that he wasn't a person of faith, that he didn't do the whole church thing, and I was talking to him about how God cares for him. And he said, I don't really do religion, and I love when people share that, because I'm like, neither do I, so we're in the same boat. I remember I asked him, I said, do you ever believe in, signs sometimes? I'm not like a huge science person, but sometimes God is trying to wave his arms at us. So do you ever believe that? He's like, yeah, I guess so. And I said, you just got 25,000 invites to church. So, I don't know what to say. You're getting another one here pretty soon, so 25,001. I don't know about you, but I'm a little bit of a slow learner sometimes, and sometimes it takes God a while of waving his arms at me to get my attention. Maybe you were dragged here this morning. Maybe you saw the front of the building when you drove by. Maybe somebody invited you, ran into them out in public. But maybe the God of heaven is trying to get your attention right now. The God who made the stars, as we talked about earlier. The God who made the very ground that we stand on. He made you as well. And you may look at your life and say, wow, I'm a hot mess. And maybe you're right. I am too. Understand the king of this world would love to also be a friend. And I don't know what you think you know about this following Jesus stuff, but not only is it real, but it can be in your life, and it can be the very thing that you're looking for, if you let it be. I don't know if you're tired of trying to pull yourself up from your own bootstraps. I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt. I don't know if you're in a season of being a little too proud to ask for help. Hey, maybe that's me. I'm a guy. I can't help it. But maybe now we're in a place of saying, Lord, I've tried it my own way for a long time. And now I'm up for trying it your way. Not about fixing everything you've done wrong. It's about saying, Lord, I'm sorry. I want you.